We've all seen it. We've watched parents juggle multiple responsibilities for generations. My mom did it, your mom did it, and her mom before that. It's just something we've always done without much discussion. But isn't that part of the problem? How is juggling parenting, paid work, running a household, and so much more not a bigger deal? It's like having three jobs rolled into one with a never ending stream of decisions to make every single day. Especially now, in this age of high expectations and information overload, where everything is just a click away. This work is so often unsupported, underappreciated, and completely unrecognized. We take it for granted both within ourselves and among us. This year, I'm juggling a fair bit myself. I'm pregnant with my second child, trying my best to be present for my sweet toddler, managing our household, working full time, and producing season 2 of my podcast, Bump In. I started Bump In mostly for myself. In season 1, I've had the chance to speak with some incredible parents about their early parenting journeys and have learned so much. I hope you have too. This season, I'm celebrating all things juggling, the many aspects of being an adult and parenting shared straight from parents. We'll also dive into the support systems, or a lack of them, that shape our experiences and explore ways to better support ourselves, our families, communities, and workplaces. Join me for some fascinating conversations available on Spotify and YouTube in season 2 of Bump In with me, your host, Shruti Bharat. Hi, Kakoli. Welcome to my podcast, Bump In. As you know, this is the second season of the podcast. And one of the reasons I set this up was to have more conversations around early parenting and all of the support systems surrounding that experience for us as Indian millennial parents. I'm so happy to have you on the show today, and I can't wait to get our conversation started. As with all of the episodes that we've had on the podcast so far, we usually begin with who the person is, what they're about, and where in the world they are. So we'd love to hear from you.
You. First of all, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. When I was going through the write up that you sent me, and then I went through your website, and I was like, okay, when I was parenting, early parenting, I had this idea in my mind as well. And here is somebody who is managing so many roles and doing a fantastic job of it. So thank you so much. I wish I had this resource when I was going through that phase. I'm glad you're doing the work because there's so many who need to hear what challenges that happens during this time and access to resources. So thank you for doing this. So who am I, right? And I was reflecting on the question this morning. I think I'm at that phase of life where I am trying to all the roles that are not the roles. Everything who I have been has come to a culmination and it's sort of conspiring for me to make the offering that I have to in this world. I may sound a little philosophical, but that's also who I am. So to put in tangible words, I have about 20 years of experience, work experience. I'm an engineer by academic background. Back in our age, I think those were two options pretty much. I'm a mother, and I say that loud and clear because a big part of who I am is because of my experience of motherhood and because of who I want to be in the journey. And a lot of my friends don't call it out being mother because there can be so many meanings made out of the word, but I sort of have learned to really own the word. I am a mother. 3 boys, almost 2 are teenagers, and one is about to be a teenager in 1.5 years.
Amazing.
And I'm a poet, a writer, an artist, and they're a big part of who I am on a daily basis. I'm a spiritual seeker, and feminist studies interest me a lot. I'm in that juncture of life where I'm really trying to find out the feminine and the feminist studies, feminist history. How can they integrate to give us a more wholesome life, right? I feel somewhere, and I've written about it recently, in the whole quest of equality, we have confused that with being identical. So what does it really mean for women of this generation to navigate the world? It probably is not about matriarchy replacing patriarchy, but it needs to be a new way of living, new way of being. So I'm in quest of that. So did I explain to you who am I?
You did, and you did. And I was, full admission, I was so drawn to your profile when I semi-stalked you on LinkedIn. I sort of learned about you through a mutual connection, Disha, who I'm also going to be speaking to as part of the podcast. And Kakoli, what an interesting background you have. And that's actually what drew me to you. And I saw your writings. I saw, a lot of what you've been doing professionally as well that really drew me in, right? So I'm very excited about this conversation.
So am I.
Just to give you and our listeners a perspective on where we are in the journey of Bumpin', right? So the last season was 9 episodes, and we talked a lot about many firsts. What the first 6 months, 12 months feel like, both physically and emotionally. What it means for a parent going through an identity shift, what it means to be a parent, a millennial particularly. It's very rooted in, I would say, an Indian urban context. I don't think we're really touching into rural stories in any specific way. But a lot of the takeaways from the last season was very raw, very relatable stories from parents who've either gone through it or are currently going through it. Now, interestingly, in this season, I'm currently close to 32 weeks pregnant with my second one. So I've got a pretty prominent bump. And I thought that this season I was inspired really to talk about a slightly different dimension of parenting, which is where you and folks like Disha and others really stand out to me as clear voices in this space. You're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of parenting journey. Clearly, you don't have little ones, which actually I think makes you a better position to kind of talk about what we're about to speak about. It struck me that, especially when you look at platforms like LinkedIn and other social media, you see a lot of celebration of success in the form of professional victories. And it deserves its space, it deserves its platform. But what is rarely spoken about is how much parents, particularly mothers, I can comment on that with a little more first-hand experience, are juggling just so much, right? In terms of 3, 4 roles at any given time, maybe one or more children, and doing it silently. And as you mentioned, even in your intro, sometimes even with a degree of being secretive or maybe even a little bit ashamed. So I think a part of me wants to unpack that a little bit. Why did we get here? Why, as empowered women who occupy space in our urban settings, are we still afraid to talk about the juggling act, right? And what it entails. And I think by extension, also talking about, hey, what is the type of support systems we have surrounding us in this journey as we start off as parents? I think this is going to be able to resonate with not only folks who are currently parents, or becoming parents soon, but also a generation of folks who are considering whether they should do it at all. And I think it's an important conversation to have. So, Kakoli, that's what I'm looking forward to chatting with you about, right? So we'll jump right in. I have every season, I hope to do some sort of a signature question. Last season, it was really about, funny moments in the peak of early parenting. In this season, I actually want to start with the question rather than end with the question. As a mother, as a woman, what does juggling mean to you?
It's such a loaded question.
It is. Sounds innocent enough, but not so much.
Such a loaded question. Before even getting to the question, I think as you were describing the theme of this season, I felt going through so many emotions, because today I can say that today I'm here talking to you and I know my kids can take care of themselves. There have been times in my life where I could not finish even one call without, forget about being disturbed by them, but without this mental load. I wonder if they are safe. I wonder if they went to the kitchen and picked up a knife, or I wonder they were fighting. It's so heavy, it's very visceral as well. I think this whole load, it's very visceral. I felt it all over when you said it. And then I had to remind myself you're not there anymore. Yeah, it's very visceral. Okay, so coming to the word juggling, right? And I am speaking here completely from my experience because that's the experience I own. Honestly speaking, I felt guilty all early childhood, early parenting. I felt guilty because I really wanted to be a present mother. And I read from all parenting books, they all say that the early childhood period is a period where a human life, lot of who we become later is a residue or a result of what happens in early childhood. So I wanted to be present as an adult, as a fully present, regulated adult to my children. But then the societal systems in our current world doesn't let you be, right? Because now I often think our generation of women, we are raised to be independent. I mean, we are expected to be independent, but at the same time, raised to be marriageable, to be likable, to be all of that. And I think that's the confusion we live with, right? Which role do I assume this or that? Because it's not, for me, it feels like it's not yet an and universe, it's an or universe. You can be do this or be this. You can't be both. And at least the way our systems are, I ended up feeling very guilty not working. I didn't work for 6 years. I could afford to, and I'm grateful to the universe that I could. I didn't work for 6 years. I mean, I rejoined work on the sixth birthday of my eldest. But then all throughout, I felt very guilty. Being a mother was not an identity, right? I mean, who are you? Actually, what work do you do? What's the productive, valuable work that you do that can be encashed in economic contribution? That seems to be the mindset that we,
Yeah.
and but in your heart you want to do both, right? You want to have a wholesome experience of life. So that's the juggling bit, and I wasn't able to do it well. My youngest child, I think he suffered this whole transition that I was going about coming back to work because he was suddenly on all on his own. By the time I also became a single parent, so there was a lot that was going on. So it's a heavy thing. That's all I can say. And it's and you feel you're not enough, and you're failing every single day because every morning I remember writing the intentions. I'll uh, whatever, 5 things, 10 things to do. By the end of the day, even two are not done.
Yeah.
So every single day, I felt like a huge failure. I felt like this is a choice that I made. Being a mother is a choice that I made. It is, it is a, it is a choice of privilege that I made, and hence I have to be penalized for it, right? By by a slower career trajectory, by convincing myself why I'm fit for this job. So I really have to try very hard to convince my worth, not have to work double to just prove that I can be in the game. Forget about excelling. That comes with a lot more. It's a lot of work. It's tiring. There's depleting. It is. It is. Yeah.
That is, Kakoli, such a relatable response. So there are so many things I want to share in response to that. I think I'm fairly earlier in my journey. I have a 3-year-old, and like I said, I have another one on the way. I think at that sort of I've started and I'm getting into my journey. And in my observation or my experience of juggling is just the amount we have to kind of put on ourselves on a daily basis, whether it's doing good by your child. And you're absolutely right, these are the years that are so formative in terms of their emotional backbone. We know so much more today about a child's development, so just being able to be there for your child in the right way, be able to be there for yourself, manage your household, which is all your responsibility, potentially do paid work because we've all sort of come up, fairly financially independent. And not to mention there's a partner somewhere in the scheme of things who also has to be, managed in some ways. I think it's a lot. And I often am conflicted because I see people in my general view, people who are my age or younger, who seem to be managing just fine. They're not overthinking it. They seem to be swimming through the journey kind of fairly unscathed, not going through the mental load, not going through the emotional weight of guilt or intrusive thoughts. But I find myself often wading through quite a bit of that, right? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough is the prevailing question. While also having to juggle being somewhat apologetic for just making it in a few spaces and a few of my roles and responsibilities. I think where I've been really sort of monitoring the self-talk is to be a lot less apologetic. So I'm fully leaning into, hey, this is my life stage and this is what I'm about, right? Take it or leave it. I can do that pretty much everywhere other than with my kid. But I think it's a massive amount of mental energy going into juggling. Most people focus, I've seen, with all the best intentions on the logistics. So one thinks that juggling is a matter of logistics. If you install enough help, if you have, all of your lists in place, if you have all of your gears in place, you're going to be fine. You're going to manage just fine. But if that was the case, I mean, I think there'd be a lot less mental health issues. There'd be a lot more emotional stability in the world and all of that. So if logistics was the answer, I don't think we'd have half the challenges we do in the world we live in today, right?
Wow. And
Uh,
I'm feeling drawn to share something here.
sure, please do.
I think this is my observation of the world. Some of us feel a little bit more because there is a being inside us, probably which wants space. And I would actually congratulate ourselves if we are beginning to feel that pain, right? That means the being is on its way to evolve. A lot of us, probably even we, before we started feeling the pain, we're just existing, right? In the logistics, in the doing, in the action.
Correct.
It's that. And that's one way to navigate as well. But I think from the experience of my life and the spirals that I had been in, that's just coping though. The logistics is just coping because it's sort of numbing you till the next spiral begins. And then our entire lifespan may just be spent in doing this, or we acknowledge that, okay, there is something in me that needs space right now. Either I create the space, begin to create as much space as I can now, or I'm going to again create another spiral. I think that's what's beginning to happen in the pain that you feel or what I am feeling. And I have also been very curious. Why is it only me? I see so many others. And also, I did one, look at them. They're having this glamorous life of Friday nights and
Yeah.
Sunday brunches. And why is it that I am struggling? Then I realized that my children's happiness, them thriving in their own world, in their world, is very important. Is not just important. I think it's critical for mine, and I might as well accept and acknowledge and embrace it than try to be someone else, right? Because I probably will not be able to enjoy a Sunday brunch, knowing that Sunday is the only day probably my children spend at home. Maybe we can do something family, some family activity together. That's for me to acknowledge it. So till that time, I can only deny so many times. If I acknowledge and embrace it, then it becomes easier.
So, Kakoli, I want to dive deeper, right? I think you and I are touching upon the fact that I think we're sensitive folks. We move through the world with, our emotions on our sleeve in some sense.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few of us. I don't think we're a minority. There's a good chunk of people like us who need to hear what we're talking about today. I think the juggling is real. And I think celebrating it more and talking about it more, even when it's not particularly fun, is super important. And if anything I do in this season, it is to create a space to celebrate that, right? With all its warts and glory. So I just want to kind of segue into some of the parts that I want to talk to you about. As we've been saying, you're a little bit ahead in the journey. You have three wonderful children, and that I'm sure is its own story to tell. But Kakoli, wanted to understand from your personal and professional journey, everything you've been through, both personally and professionally, what is your perspective on the type of support that mothers particularly need in their early years? And maybe you can draw from your own experience an example.
I somewhere wrote about this, right? The challenges our generation of mothers and women are navigating is because of the access to education and all of that which our parents have really invested in us. It is evident that we're expected to be successful and do well in a system that penalizes families, right? Big time. And by that I mean really small things. Uh, see, our the timings of a school and work, why does it have to be in a way that it's so challenging? Mornings are so challenging, right? And I had a very tough time showing up for work because of the mere timing of schools beginning at a certain time and also work beginning at a certain times. I had to, that became my every single morning. I felt like this is my Mahabharata, I have to somehow, and this is pre-COVID when I was supposed to be at work, physically present every single day. And then there are these odd things about school dispersal that happens that one child gets off at 1, the other gets off at 3:30, and there are no buses to that particular neighborhood where you live. Now, what do you do? There are only so many times you can ask a favor from somebody or even have help. Helps don't turn up every single day. That's another problem in India. We have access to help, but it's not reliable, high quality help, right? It's some of us are fortunate with good health, but it's not like a given that if you pay for it, you will have predictability in that system. I had challenges when I'm in picking up in small things and dropping them, picking them up, and they were small. And I was at work, and some of these meetings used to extend till late evening. And then if I know I'm talking about micro things, but those micro things are very important. Those raised eyebrows when I would want to leave at 5 and I began work at 8. So, or, oh, everybody's free to catch up at 5:30. Why don't we catch up now? And I am not present there. I'm already switched off, and I'm constantly worrying. I felt, and I would look at my male colleagues. I remember this one time I was looking at my male colleagues and we came to this meeting. I had nothing prepared and it was about 5:30 in the evening. And he had a presentation ready. I'm like, my goodness, how am I ever going to succeed? And this is a world, corporate world, unfortunately, is also a world of showing you're better than somebody else, right? And I was thinking to myself, how can I ever get the promotion? Because I don't have the mind space to prepare for anything, right? And this meeting is, I'm already feeling like I am not at par. Um, and to overcome that imposter syndrome, like, why are you even wanting to be successful here? Doubting myself, cursing myself so much. And it doesn't end in that particular meeting. I come home feeling beaten. I come home feeling very bitter about the choices that I made in my life. Where the hell will I do with my life? Am I even empowered enough to the choices that I made in my life? Did I even make them well? Did I weigh them? All those questions would come in. So coming back to your question, I think these are the lack of these micro moments that I talked to you about is a lack of support. A supportive system would have felt like a mother, a woman, a parent. I know I'm talking about a woman and a mother because that's my lived experience, but I know many men also opt for this role these days. I think its flexibility is very important. Working from home even is very important. I've recently read about how it negatively impacts women who do housework, but then that's another conversation. But for me, working from home really enabled me because I can finish this meeting and then I can go and have a look at my kids. Even that 5 minutes I think is important before I step into the next segment of work. The tea, work from home, and being aware of uh, the schedules, 7 a.m. meetings, just because everyone is free in a global team. Is that the right time even for this one particular person who is dealing with a certain challenge in life, not challenge, certain situation. In an ideal world, it's a situation. It's not really a challenge, right? Being cognizant of that are very important. That's what supportive system would look like, I think. Yeah. Not big policy changes, but these small things go a long way.
I completely agree. I think that you've said so much in terms of the expectations at work, right? And I think no matter where you work, there are going to be degrees of this. There is an implicit expectation that you come back as you were before you became a mother. And you have to, in many ways, hide that side of yourself, right? In order to be relevant, in order to be competitive,
Right.
in order to stand out, because the terms of success are fairly male centric.
Yes.
They are not, they make a more female centric success as almost handicaps. Oh, you're doing it despite being, an 8-hour worker. You're doing this despite working from home. So you're almost operating from a space of handicap. You have to hide elements of yourself and your constraints. I can't imagine the effect this would have on your motivation overall to work and be successful. And I think I've also seen women who don't even realize this is happening to them. They are unable to get off the treadmill or the hamster wheel and continue to feel that the rules of the game are very much about being some of these things.
Yeah. I again feel like saying something. This whole linear masculine system of work today, like if we make space for ourselves today, like if we and women start making space for ourselves, that might seem like, being snobbish, coming from a space of privilege. But just for a moment, and I had asked myself I had to remember myself to do this. If this was a mother centric universe, how things would have played out even at place of work, right? Um, if that was the world that we lived in, what is happening as default today would have seemed like a very weird exception, right? And I'm not saying that it has to go back to the indigenous way of living, but I'm saying that even for us as a human race to meet the world where it is today, we need to find an integration of both. And I think I talk a lot about that integration in my post on LinkedIn, right? And it wasn't really easy to talk about it because those raised eyebrows where I could almost see them even on my post. That integration is so important. And like you said, even women are unaware of it. We talk about benevolent bias, which is about women coming back from, in particular, I think when women come back from work, I've seen a lot of women fight that, okay, why was I not given this opportunity? It's just because I came back from work. This whole is a double-edged sword, I think, because a woman, when she comes back from work, comes back from maternity break, needs a different kind of support. I think it's for us women also to take that space rightfully, right? I have gone through a life-changing situation, event in my life. I need care. I need nurture in this space. And it is okay for me to ask and receive that. I think I would invite more women to get into that space of knowing that it's okay to ask for that nurture. It's okay to get into that space of softness and receiving that nurture, receiving that support, because fighting the hard way is not the only way to live, right? Our ancestors have done that. We are here now. So how can we navigate this better? It's not really about, no, I'm a mother now. That doesn't mean you write me off this opportunity. No, you do it when you can do it with ease, right? You don't have to fight your well-being. You don't have to fight your sacrifice in mental health and your children's mental health and well-being to really do this task at this point in time. I think my approach has been that. And I'm saying this with a little bit of caution because it can be misinterpreted, right? But to come into that soft space of softness and ask and receive nurture that we need, and rightfully and not feeling guilty about it.
So, Kakoli, whatever you just said, I fully agree. And I think this topic is fairly contentious, right? So there's aspects of it, and I want to bring that out and hear what you have to say about it. I think there's some issue on the side of women. I say this, and I know this is controversial, is that we have been conditioned to believe that once you become a mother and you're juggling paid work, you are already at a setback. You are already working against constraints. You will have to work 2x, 3x harder to prove yourself. So we're already getting into this mind space. Secondly, we're in a system, most people, if not all, are in systems that are fairly leaning towards a male centricity in terms of a male paradigm of success, not accounting for flexibility. These are the realities of most workplaces or most work environments, with some exceptions, of course. Third, we are truly juggling 2 to 3 full-time jobs. Taking care of a household, taking care of a child, and taking care of a job is easily 2.5 jobs. This is too much for one person. The math doesn't add up. So when you put all three together, you have inherited a certain set of expectations and a conditioning about what you are as a woman once you've become a mother in paid work. You're in an environment that is not necessarily supporting your version of success. You also have, interestingly, both men and women in the workplace who hold similar paradigms. So, unfortunately, I've heard very senior women say that there are women who take advantage of maternity flexibility. There are viewing it as a very zero-sum game, right, overall from a systemic point of view. And thirdly, it is really about the amount of pressure we have to sort of be all of these things all at once, because oftentimes, even when from, a space of reasonable privilege, financial independence is very important for many of us, right? We do want to continue to work in some capacity and be able to contribute to the household in whatever sense we can economically. And I think for me, the last space is, at the end of the day, I think as a society, I just don't think we respect the job of mothering enough. If there was someone actively paying for it, I'm sure it would be extremely remunerative. Because what we are essentially doing is bringing up a generation of the next generation in some sense, and everyone's done it. It's a rite of passage. The human race has existed for many, many years before and after this podcast, and parents have come and gone, right? But now today we have this notion that, we have to really juggle a lot. We have to do so many things, but there's not enough spaces in some sense to break some of these conditioning, some of these lack of flexibility support systems. There's a very zero-sum thinking still prevailing in terms of how to support mothers back into the system. And most of the time, even with the best intentions, I think whether it be workplaces or communities, we think logistics is the answer 10 out of 10 times. My hypothesis is that it actually starts a little bit with the mother herself in terms of being able to self-advocate and really lean into the role of being a mother without apology. And I think that also is something I heard you talk about, right? And say and today when you introduce yourself, that's a headline statement for you, which is fantastic. So what are your thoughts on this, Kakoli?
It's again a loaded question, okay? I think some bit of my response that I was running in my head, you yourself said at the end, there are 3 parts responses. As you said, it's about self, it's about the systemic collective change, and it's about where does it also begin? Where is the space to talk about it? Okay. I think I'll just begin by saying this is way back in 15, and I heard the statement from a gentleman actually, and it had such profound impact on me that you can probably see tears welling up in my eyes. So I wasn't working then, and I was playing with my kids. I was visiting my sister. It's one evening in Bothell in Seattle. I was playing with the kids in the front yard. My sister had this couple over, and they were both in their 50s at that point in time, and they had not decided to have children. And this gentleman was playing with the kids, and then he just asked me, "So what do you do?" So I mean, he just asked me. I don't think so. He asked me, "What do you do?" He just kind of introduced himself. And I felt very heavy. Okay, how do I introduce myself? Because I don't have an identity. I am just, a mother. I probably was not mothering from that empowered space, which I do now. And I'm proud of myself for doing that. And I was really struggling to come up with an answer. And, I say it in a very dismissive way. Well, you know what? I just a stay-at-home mother. Then he turned around and said, "What did you just say? You just a stay-at-home mother. You are the social architect for the human civilization of the future. You should really take pride in that job." And that perspective was so profound. And I was really reflecting the same thing that you were saying. We are penalized so much for doing this job. We are actually uh, we are architects of human civilization, right? But there is no attention, respect, forget about reverence, which was the word in the past, used for in association with this role, right? Now, in the ideal world, I mean, that's one statement that created a huge paradigm shift in me. I wouldn't say overnight. I mean, the conditioning is so deep, it takes time. But I decided that, okay, this is the path. I'm going to own this. And I'm being called to do this as well. I really enjoy being a mother. So why do I have to really fight what I really enjoy? So that was my question. What's my delight? What's my joy in life? Why do I have to fight? Why can't life itself be an experience of the joy? Was my basic overarching theme. And then I thought, okay, I am going to look at every aspect of the current system that is blocking me from my space of joy, from my space of delight, because it needs to be investigated, not just for me as an individual, but for everyone, because life is meant to be an experience of joy. So that's how I began. Now, initially, I was very angry everyone at the conditioning of man-woman relationship itself, the dynamics that play out, patriarchy and corporate systems, and there was a lot of anger, right? But then I realized this anger is not really getting me anywhere, okay? Because the changes that need to be done are so overarching that it needs many collaborators, right? It needs a lot of networks, a lot of conversations, a lot of connections. Then I thought, what if I alchemize my anger? And that alchemization of anger doesn't happen externally, it happens internally. So I had to start with self-work. I'm not dismissing the fact that change needs to happen in the systems. It does need to happen. And the conversations also need space. And that's what you and I are doing today, talking about it, giving it space. And I'm sure it is going to have its ripple effect. But I think like you said, advocacy has to begin from self. We have to understand that the work we are doing is very important. Only when we understand that, it will be reflected by others' behavior towards us. Today, before I came into this conversation, I was telling my best friend that, okay, I am having this conversation in this really nice podcast which talks about all things that I wanted to talk. And she told me, see, it's your validation. It's a validation of your journey because you expressed who you are fully in an unbridled way. She could hear there were no mixed signals. I think that's about it. I think once we learn to appreciate that the work that we are doing is important, then we will start creating space around it. And then people like you and I will connect. And then we will make the changes that needs to be made in this world. They need to be made. I am not dismissing it, but the journey starts itself.
I couldn't agree more with you, Kakoli. I think so much to respond to. I do think that it is women like you and me who are talking about this experience is itself an important step one. We're saying that this is normal. That to feel this way, to feel like you are juggling too much, to feel the weight of expectations, to feel like you have to hide aspects of yourself is normal. And I think that itself is a huge step in empowering even, say, 10 women, right, who might hear this conversation. And I think I fully, when you were talking about your anecdote about the stay-at-home mom, it really hit home for me. So I think when I look at my mother's generation, I remember the shame with which my mother operated in the world, despite being a very, very talented woman and a wonderful mother. She was bringing her A game every day, but she felt the weight of inadequacy because she was not economically contributing to the household. I think it is so unfortunate that our value is tied to economics. I think today we have the responsibility and privilege to have other indicators beyond economics speak about our success. And I think that to me is truly being empowered. So I'm in an interesting juncture of my life. I've about 15 years of work experience, and I came to a crossroads this year because I'm expecting my second. And I, like you, Kakoli, being a mother for me is possibly the most life-changing and important thing that's ever happened to me. I feel I've actually fulfilled my life's purpose by bringing, two beautiful children into this world. So I do think that it's truly special for me as an experience. But I really wrestled with, will this affect, how my career is going? And I really have spent the last months talking myself out of this spiral of a year in your life, 2 years in your life, of taking time off to nurture children is a drop in the bucket of a full career, right? And that is a story I want to powerfully own and tell, and not say with an asterisk or an apology or a, hey, I had to do this. No, I chose to do this. I want to do this. I am exercising and leaning into the sacrifice and compromise and privilege that generations before me have done in order for me to be where I am today, and have all of this, wisdom in my thoughts. So for me, I think I feel like the beginning of this conversation of creating more external support beyond self-advocacy is being truly unapologetic for who you are in your full identity. And secondly, it's really about starting to normalize constraints as realities. This is not a constraint. If I have to leave a meeting at 5 o'clock, it's because I have another job. It's not because I have a handicap. I'm doing another important job that unfortunately does not get evaluated as part of this job. I don't get paid for it, but it's really important in the scheme of things. And I think the more of us start to talk and operate in the world in this way, I think we're going to bring change through our own actions. And that's my conviction. So I too hold a lot of optimism as you do.
Yes, yes. Uh, Using the journey of motherhood, how it empowered, I just wanted to share how it empowered me. You mentioned the word constraint. Another friend of mine actually offered me this word. They are actually beautiful constraint. I'll just use an analogy, how water body without boundaries is flood. It's inundation, right? It doesn't have purpose. But when it has boundaries, it becomes a river. It nourishes, nurtures. That's what I feel of myself after the journey of motherhood, because there is a purpose. There is a purpose. And I read somewhere in one of the parenting books, I think motherhood is how we all want to become better versions of ourselves, better versions of ourselves. This is like a mirror staring at us every day. This is your opportunity. This is their opportunity. Right? And that's who you become as that's the process. I think the motherhood is a process of, it's a privilege, I would say. It's a privilege and a blessing for us to even get in touch with what's hidden in different parts of us. So that's an opportunity, I would say. And that's how I would like to change the narrative for women like us who have opted for motherhood. And as we talk about it more and more, our journeys, I think the invitation, and I want to congratulate you for doing this, having more and more such conversations so that we start making this a normal way of looking at life, looking at motherhood. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Kakoli. I think doing this podcast has been in some ways, actually, mostly for me, it's been a way to connect with really inspiring parents and women like yourself. It's also just a way to have a conversation and be super honest and candid about what's really happening. Like I said, for me, if this touches one person, 10 people, 100 people, I think it's fine. But it mostly helps me. It's a little bit of a selfish cause, I suppose. So interestingly, we've worked through quite a few of the questions I had. What I wanted to maybe wind down with, Kakoli, is I know we talked in our conversation. I think we've really agreed on the fact that it begins with the self. There's a certain belief and conviction and advocacy. It starts there, and then you begin to create a ripple effect through your own conversations and your own self representation. But I would love to hear from you in terms of um, what is a good way to start even that. I know that, I mean, I'm someone who, like, it sounds like you do too, consume a lot of content, maybe read a lot, talk to people. You're consuming information about parenting and, developing a philosophy around it. But I'm thinking about, folks who are not necessarily doing that. And what is a good starting point in your view to begin, say, support at the family level, at the individual level, and then branch out, into organization and community? Anything comes to mind?
Sure. So my process has been, of course, it started with consuming content, books, reading a lot of books. But after that, though, and I wanted to offer this to you as well, women's circles is what changed me completely. And I was very lucky to find. Initially, it happened in an unorganized way, and then it happened in an organized way. I think women's spaces, and when I women's space aware spaces, women's circles are great places to be part of, and I find them very healing because when you are consuming content as well, you're having internal dialogues, right? I feel women heal collectively. And to have another woman hold space for you who has gone through the same journey as you, and to have your best interest in mind, to have access to such nurturing spaces has been the game changer in my experience. So if you can, and you can always reach out to me as well. I'm just kind of saying, me and my friend, we run women's circles as well. So I think that's a great place to bring yourself to such spaces, and then also discover aspects about you which you had forgotten, which you would probably see mirrored in another woman, right? And then you realize, oh, okay, I have that side in me which I have not paid attention to, but I see it in her and I recognize that in me. And these are safe spaces. When I say the word women's circles, I mean it in a certain way. These are groups of women who are on a certain path and who live life with certain consciousness. I think having access to such spaces is amazing, right? Then you also start building a collective voice. Then you can reach out for changes that need collective voice. So it begins with self-introspection. Great. I think we can access women's circles, women's spaces, nurturing, gentle women's spaces. I call that out, nurturing, gentle, because many a times it can be hustle spaces as well. So I am saying it out, gentle, nurturing spaces for women. If we can create those for ourselves, if we don't have access to one, those are great spaces where change can begin, internal as well as preparation for external changes.
That's such a wonderful recommendation, Kakuli, and I'd love to link the space that you and your friend have created as well. And I did definitely see that in your overall profile. What I'm taking away from this conversation is really the power of course, a lot of reflection, self-examination, but leaning into, I think you spoke about it in the beginning, a little bit of that feminine energy, and really being able to tap into that space, step out of this hustle kind of cycle that we're in, and find nurturing role models, friends, companions who can talk you through and walk you through some of these initial parts of it. Because I think we think we've got it figured out, but the figured out is really a piecemeal from, say, movies, pop culture, people we've seen, some misguided advice from a lot of different people. I think the just beginning with the awareness to say, hey, I need to break out of this, because for me to be able to be the leader, the mother, the worker, the entrepreneur I want to be, authenticity, being true to who I actually am, will help anchor it to a real identity. And I think that's for me the biggest takeaway of this conversation. I thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time talking to you. I fully feel your energy through this discussion, and I'm just coming away with so much energy myself. So thank you so much, Kakoli, for making time on a Saturday morning. I know your three boys are fairly self-sufficient, but I really appreciate you doing this and having this chat with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. I mean, like you, lot of times during the conversation, I could feel it here. Whatever you were saying, there was a response here, like there was a visceral response. Thank you so much for having me here. One, for giving me space to talk about what's important to me, and most importantly, for creating this space. I congratulate you. I really wanted to do this, when I was going through early parenting myself. But I see you do this. It's almost like my own success. Thank you so much for doing this, and congratulations.